Muchas gracias, muy buenos días. Tengan todas y todos ustedes. Good morning. Very pleased to be here. Honored that I have been invited for this 45-minute chat with you about experiences in Mexico, about experiences in Latin America, about experiences in North America trade agreement, but more so about experiences for sustainable growth, which is the issue of this conference. Although on the title of my conference, we speak about human capital or social capital building in Latin America. Let me start by saying that only those who know where they're going get there. So to have purpose, to have a clear sight of where we're going is most important. And maybe in Latin America, since independence and some of the revolution changes that we had all throughout the continent, but since then, especially in independence, we had purpose. We knew clearly where we were going. And everything happened simultaneously all throughout Latin America. When Mariscal Sucre, which I'm reading a book about him right now, and Bolivar were riding the horses and fighting for independence, in Mexico, it was our own heroes, Hidalgo, Morelos, and the rest. And a little bit before, Washington was riding in North America. So these waves of changes come along when there is purpose and clear vision of where to go. Today, Latin America, after a century of dominant, strong governments, not to say dictators, military dictators, strong authoritarian governments, messianic leaders, populist strategies, like the ones imposed by the Perons in Argentina. We lost the century. We could have done much better if our fundamentals would have been democracy and freedom, which was the old reason why the independence and why the changes and revolutions that we had all along the century. When you don't live by democracy, when all citizens don't enjoy freedom, there is a lot of losses. Because without freedom, there is no innovation, no creativity, no way to move ahead. Without freedom, societies, citizenship doesn't grow. And we stayed throughout the 20th century as small children in all of Latin America, expecting everything from the dictator, expecting everything and extending our hand to get the gifts of sustainable development from the powerful. And that never happened. It never happens. It only happens in democracies, where people is part of the effort, where citizens are mature, where citizens participate intensely in building nations. We still have that confusion that governments create wealth, that governments create jobs, and that's an absolute lie. But still in Latin America, most every government is presumptions that they created jobs. and that they created wealth. The only way to create wealth and to create jobs is through investment, through entrepreneurship, through promoting corporations, businesses, organizing to create wealth and to create the jobs. But here we're today, which seems to be that Latin America finally found its path to the 21st century. And yes, in the last 2 decades of the last century, most of Latin American nations became democratic and became free. It's incredible. We're talking only about 20 years since this democratizing wave with all these powerful winds came through Latin America. And yes, we got rid of all the dictators in Uruguay, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Nicaragua, Salvador, you name it. And we got rid of them. And then we started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then Latin America, for the first time, enjoys sustainable growth. Rates of over 5% growth a year. And this only happened because the changes in democracy and freedom. So now we know the path. Now we know what we have to do. But now we understand that we're lagging way, way behind other regions of the world. So we have a great task to narrow that gap and to be in the front side of development. And we must watch out about a couple of things. Number one, other emerging regions. I made a series of visits to Africa, invited to speak, and invited by the African Union. And they decided to have a model. They do have a model today. They're taking the model of the European Union, and they're following the steps one by one. And it's incredible. In very short term, many of the nations in Africa are enjoying growth up to 20% right now. Of course, when you're starting from scratch, from zero, you tend to grow quite fast at the beginning. Once you're getting matureness in your economy, then you're slowed down. But Africa will bring a lot of things to speak about on this 21st century. The strategy is clear. All for one, one for all. The philosophy of the European Union. Although the European Union is confronting problems right now, but it's incredible the miracle of joining together, the miracle of unity and common task for sustainable development. And look at those figures of per capita in Europe. Although they're having trouble, but they're well over the 20,000 US dollars a year mark. And some of them way above the per capita income of the United States. And look at the distribution of income, which is a must. There's no way to have sustainable income if we don't distribute income. If we don't integrate everybody to the feast. If we don't include every citizen in our nations. That's a very important lesson, and that's something that we have to have in mind in whatever our purpose, in whatever our responsibility in our corporation or in our government we have. It's most important that we consider this variable as one of the key ingredients of success. So with this, Latin America now is on the move. And I would say then, approaching the issues of this conversation, that there is no way to change a nation, to be successful in our nations, but through education That's the only way building the human capital that is going to be sustainable development. But we not only need the human capital to do the job, we need the strategies and the leading of governments that understand what is to have a vision, what is to be sustainable, what is to be transparent, what is to avoid corruption, and what is to perform. Because purpose only be or can be successful if we perform, if we make things happen. So governance is an extremely clear ingredient needed in each one of our nations in Latin America. Democratic governments, democratic governance, democratic leadership. With that, we would have a clear path to sustainable growth, together with building the human capital that we need. And look at our education systems in Latin America, yet in hands of unions, yet in hands of teachers' unions. And I don't have anything against teachers. All the contrary, I think they are the most wonderful people in the world that will have their best performance and realization by being for others, but transferring the knowledge they have to the students in their classrooms. But unfortunately, we have a long way to go on education in the case of the leaders that we need in each classroom, the contents that we need in each classroom, the quality of the infrastructure of the education spaces. So in education in Latin America is where our big challenge is. And yes, we might say, I'm in business. My business is to make profits. And by making profits, I have happy my board and my stockholders. But that's not enough for a business mind of today. Today's social entrepreneurship, today's social corporations is the new world trend moving fast forward ahead and demonstrating that in each institution, in each corporation, we can see for the profits that the board and the stockholders are demanding, but we can see for our community. We can see for our people. We can see for our government and for our nation. We can do both things, and then things become much more successful and efficient. Social entrepreneurship today is the fastest growing trend, and it's incredible to find a company like Nestle in Bangladesh that has its own huge factory to produce the Nestle products for the citizens and the community, but at the same time they built another same-size factory to produce goods, nutritional, protein for the people excluded in Bangladesh. So social entrepreneurship is something very important for sustainability, for distribution of income, for distribution of opportunities in Latin America. The distribution share on education is much worse than the distribution of income in Latin America. Only 25 kids out of 100 have the opportunity to sit on a university classroom. The other 75% are excluded from that opportunity. And there is no way that with only 25%, we're going to meet the challenges of competition in our region with other regions. The other 75% are excluded, are not in the game. In the case of Mexico, in addition, we have 8 million so-called ninis. Ni estudian ni trabajan. They either not go to school or they either don't have a job. 8 million kids, which very possibly the reach of the cartels is that. That's their market. That's their seed market to invite them to join the cartels. And this is why 80,000 of those kids died in the 6 years of the past administration, were killed in the streets. They were not born criminals. They did not have criminality on their genes. What they missed is the opportunity to be in a school, to be in university, to have a job. And this is most important consequence of not including everybody in our plans of development. And I know we have in Latin America more public policies in relation to social commitment than anybody else in the world. But that's pure politics, let me tell you. All these programs of no hunger, zero hunger, and oportunidad is subsidizing citizens. It's again giving out the fish without teaching them how to fish. There's one great example today in the world, China. China doesn't have social policies like we do in Latin America, where we spend the big amount and the big share of our budget. China's only social policy is creating jobs. When a family or a person has a job, he doesn't need social policies. Maybe except support in education, support in health, in support in housing, but not subsidized income coming from government to them. China moves on a very simple, straight fiscal policy. 15% income tax, 15% sales tax or value-added tax. In Mexico, yet today, the latest reform, we went backwards again. When I finished government, we had reduced from 36 to 28 income tax for corporations and for companies. So we were incentivizing investment, job creation, and wealth creation, which are the modern fiscal system to tax consumption and reduce as much as possible income tax, production, and investment. And today Mexico is going back up to 36%. And still the sales tax is the same. I think that policy of China, 1-to-1, 15 sales tax and 15 income tax, is a great way to go. But how do we build sustainability? Maybe by analyzing what's been our history and our experience. In Latin America, every 4 years or every 6 years, consequence of democracy, we have new administrations. But unfortunately, each one of them comes with what they consider new ideas, what they consider that has to be corrected, that they consider that has to be changed. If we look at Latin America, the only consistent model country economy that we have, which is sustainable, which is growing on the long term, is Chile. And that's the model we should be trying to copy, all of us, except Panama. And I'll later say why. Because it's a totally different model, the one you have here. It's very fortunate what you have built here. It's incredible, it's a miracle. And I have said, I was saying before, that you have had great ministers of economic development. Mr. Chavez and Mr. Maduro. I'm joking. But what you see that is that in Latin America we take one step forward and then we take two steps backward. And all throughout the 20th century is what happened, those recurrent crises, one after the other one. Fortunately, lately now we're much more consistent and much more sustainable. But I think we're living a period of growth, enjoying growth, that might not be very sustainable. And if you look at these rates of growth lately, they come from China. They come from the huge demand of raw materials, of minerals, of oil from China. And yes, this brought Brazil to an incredible miracle of growth in the last 10 years. By the way, when I finished my administration, Mexico's economy was 25% larger than Brazilian economy. Today, Brazilian economy is twice the size of Mexico's economy. There's a lot of things to dig in and find out how that happened. And maybe in the case of Mexico, again, is governance and effectiveness of government. Because our political structure, although is highly democratic, we have consolidated a democracy, balance of powers, and all that is required, but at the same time, we're not moving enough. Sometimes democracy under presidential systems is showing an incapacity for growth, for reaching decisions that the nation needs. This permanent conflict between different ideologies and different parties is withholding progress. Look at Mexico with the key strategic reforms that just happened last year. The constitutional change in energy, fiscal policy, education, and telecom. 4 key strategic reforms that were presented to Congress 18 years ago by President Cedillo. And opposition took responsibility of opposing and not permitting those reforms to progress for 3 administrations. President Cedillo tried to change, Congress and PRI opposed. President Fox tried to change, Congress and PRD opposed. Presidente Calderón tried to change, and everybody opposed. And finally, fortunately, Presidente Enrique Peña Nieto made things happen. Of course, the reforms are a blend of different ideologies, but still welcome for a nation that needed badly these reforms. If we just take into account energy, look at what happened in Peru, what happened in Colombia, what happened in Brazil after those reforms were carried on. They at least increased the pace of growth by 2 or 3% on their gross product. The fast runners of growth right now, except Panama, is Brazil, is Colombia, and is Peru. So there's a lot to expect out of this change in Mexico, out of this energy reform. For the first time in close to 100 years, private investment is permitted to come and join in and invest in the oil industry. Up to now, it was 100% reserved to the lousy manager and lousy running of Pemex by the government. So 2 great opportunities coming. One, to overcome the lag behind that we have in management, in technology, in capital building within Pemex, and on the other hand, the brain, the philosophy of doing business that is coming to join in. To me, the best part of the reform in Mexico comes from the board of directors. Pemex has a board of directors of 11 people. All of them, of course, government up to now, and the union. The union had 5 positions within the board of 11. Imagine the church in hands of Luther. This is what was Pemex up to now. Now, finally, those 5 members of the union are going to be replaced by private sector and academy. To me, that's the most interesting point on the change that we're going to see in Mexico. Same thing is going on in telecom. Right now, after this reform, huge opportunities are coming on telecom in Mexico. Although Carlos Slim is my friend, very close friend, but still he had some sort of something very close to a monopoly because he controlled all the fiber optics and all the telecom communications in the nation. Now it's going to be open for everybody. So we really hope that Mexico finally finds the lost eslabón, el eslabón perdido. ¿Cómo se dice, Juan? Eslabón perdido. The lost link of growth. Because in the last 30 years, Mexico has only averaged growth on the average of 2.5%. It's been long since Mexico doesn't grow over 5%. So everybody's expecting that this move could be the answer to growth, which is most important to distribute, most important to carry on with all sustainable activities. Now let me try to narrow down to finishing so that we can have a dialogue, to have your questions or comments that I think is very important, because that will take us to where you really are interested in. There's 2 approaches to development in building human capital. One has to do to make every citizen, and especially those who conduct and lead, people of high performance capacity. So this is equipping them with leadership at the very end. Because leadership is way far more than knowledge. Not all that go to school or universities are leaders. Many that don't even know how to read or write are great leaders, like we see in communities, like we see in indigenous communities. So there is more about leadership than knowledge. And that's in here. And that's also in our right side of the brain. Leadership is the part that comes with our character, with our values, with our beliefs, with our commitments. Leadership is more a power within, a flame within ourselves that takes us to accomplish things that we never dreamed about. And that's why leadership has to have always high, heroic objectives and purpose. Because the higher that is, the more we're going to grow. And the more we're going to discover how many things we didn't know about ourselves, how much energy, capacity, resources we have that we have never used. We should never forget that we all are born leaders, and that we're leaders all the time of our life in any activity we are participating in. And the more we're committed, the more we're compassionate, the more we are convinced that doing things for others is the shortcut to happiness. And so if our cause, if our purpose is to serve, is to do for others, is to do for our corporation, is to do for our nation, is to do for our families, the more we're going to accomplish. And then we will learn how we grow and grow and grow. I started, and I shouldn't use personal examples, I started as a route salesman in Coca-Cola. My purpose was to be president of Coca-Cola. I started in politics taking care of a voting casilla, and I grew up to be president. And everything is in our mind. If we know where we're going, if we have that clear definition of purpose, we get there. That's why I see more and more probabilities that Latin America is the continent of the 21st century, because we're learning that. Maybe we learned the hard way, but now that we opened the dam, the river is flowing, we see more and more governments performing. We see more and more accountability. We see more and more commitment with education and with distribution of income. There's many former presidents, we get together like in a club, and this is the things we talk about. And what I'm doing in Mexico with Centro Fox is exactly that. Working to build leadership, working to have a clear path in our lives. And there is one concept here that I think is very important, because there is not one purpose for our life. There are many purposes. There is not one long view and something to accomplish on the long term. Every day we can accomplish and do something related to leadership. So what Deepak Chopra says, get yourselves with 5 minutes in silence every day. Think about yourself. What am I doing? What is my purpose? How am I performing? Can I do better? What can I change? Where can I commit more? Where can I be for others? That simple exercise will take you every day with enough energy to go and tackle one more objective or one more purpose. And that's, as I said, the shortcut to happiness. Latin America then has a huge challenge. And I word about Panama. Panama unites most of this concept. And that's why they have increased the pace of growth. That's why it's clear where Panama is going, has a very clear conception of the model they're using and how they're going to keep it sustainable. And it's incredible what is going on here. It's the service economy, and of course, is the logistics and transportation. And let me say a word here. It might sound to you as a commercial, and it is. UST Global. I've been associated with them not business-wise, foundation-wise, to bring into Mexico the training, the increasing of human capacities, the jobs and the growth that we need to move ahead to the next phase of development. Mexico has mastered manufacturing economy. No other place in Latin America has the strength, the size of manufacturing economy as Mexico has. It's very powerful. Right now, I can assure you that it's the most competitive place to manufacture in the world. Finally, we overcame China that was taking away from us manufacturing jobs and manufacturing corporations. Today, just as an example, the state of Guanajuato, where I come from, 5.5 million people. In the last 5 years, 5 new huge automobile manufacturing plants came in just to that state. A Volkswagen, a Toyota, a Honda, a Mazda, and now a Hyundai. And we have our own huge GM plant. And in the neighboring states is the Nissan plant, which accounts for over 11,000 jobs. San Luis Potosí, that has General Motors, has Chrysler, and has other plants. And so Mexico has mastered on manufacturing. But Mexico has to think about next phase now. We have to move now to the next segment of the economy, sector of the economy that can keep producing and yielding the jobs, the growth, and the growth that we need. This manufacturing economy is moving now forward in Mexico. And that's why I mentioned the example, because UST Global comes to be part of this knowledge economy and create 10,000 jobs to engineer graduates from different universities in Mexico. So high quality jobs. India is master on this economy. It's the #1 nation in the world on information technologies. They mentioned that they export over 168 billion US dollars a year of these services, of IT services. It has created millions of jobs for Indian kids and citizens. So it's very rich and rewarding to keep moving to next phase. And this is the challenge of Latin America, building the human capital capable of moving the economy to the next phase. And again, I come to Panama. Panama didn't go through the long route of having first a basic economy, agricultural economy, mining, and raw material economy. You jump by stages, you went the shortcut, and you're on the service economy, which is great. This is what Africa is doing. Through the model they're using, they are trying to save to go the long process, which, by the way, it can be done much better than the ones that did it before, because now you know about the experiences that work and those that do not work. But still, you can jump from basic economy to service economy. You don't have to go through manufacturing like you didn't do here. Or you can jump to the knowledge economy without going through everything else. But every single step is dependent on the human capital you're building. Because if you want to build IT experts, then you have to look at the example of India again. The Indian Institute of Technology, created 50 years ago, IIT. And they copied MIT, of course. And Massachusetts Institute of Technology came to India, helped them develop and launch this great visionary project that 50 years later is paying off. This is the engine that moves the Indian economy. And so having clear where we're going, having our vocation very clearly defined, is much easier for having success than not having that clear vision. In this small place, San Cristobal, where all of you have your home, where the Fox Center Presidential Library is located at, is what this is happening. This UST installing their facilities, their corporate headquarters, to be ready to serve the whole of the continent from San Cristobal. But this industry has two great additional advantages. One is that it's mobile. It goes to where the customers are. There are large production centers, but there are satellite centers close to, like they are trying to do here in Panama now, opening one of the satellite centers to serve corporations here. And the other one is that once you learn through 3 months training, intense training, which UST does, then you have the capacity to either go to work for IBM or go to work for Infosys or start up your own business. Entrepreneurship. All these kids will have enough capacities, resources, and knowledge to start their own business. And fortunately, this business can start in your own home, just with one computer and a creative mind. And that's it. You don't need huge amount of capital to be invested. You don't need transportation and logistics because the product goes out through the fiber optics to the whole of the world. So it's a very simple model, very effective. Okay, well, with this, I guess I'm through. I understand we have a little bit of time that we can answer your questions or hear your comments. Please do, and thank you.